welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. This is episode number 59. I bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. And this week I have 7 new LitRPG reviews for you, including Realm of the Nine Circles, The Grind. After that, it'll be the SpeedRunner, Tower of Babel, Book 1. Then it'll be Winds of Fate, Fayroll, Book 3. After that, it'll be The Curse of Rion Castle, Neuro, Book 2. And then it'll be Overpowered, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquests, Book 1. Then it's going to be The Last Days of Mithril, a LitRPG adventure. And then finally, Fragged 2. And we'll begin the show, of course, with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with Alter Game, written by Andrew Novak. The second book in that series is entitled On the Last Continent. It's actually available for pre-order now. It just went up this week. However, it won't actually be out until September the 28th, 2017. So that is actually the farthest LitRPG story we're going to have on our upcoming LitRPG list. Also in LitRPG news, though, we have Daniel Schienehofen, author of the Alpha World and other series. He shared this week the new art for her first book in the Alpha World series. Apparently Podium Publishing gave it to him so that he would match the art they plan to use for the audiobook version of the book. It's very nice, actually. Kind of like it. And nice of Podium Publishing to do so. So there you go. Also in LitRPG news, we have Aileron Kong on a Facebook Live stream this week. Aileron, author of the Chaos 8 series, revealed that the next book in his series is not going to be done the beginning of July, unfortunately. Remember, folks, he's an actual doctor. He has life-saving work to do, and it kept him a little more busy than he thought it was going to be. He's hoping to have it finished by the end of July, however. Additionally, he says that the audiobooks for the series are coming along great. Nick Podell is the audiobook narrator for that series. He's doing a kick-butt job, apparently, and we'll hopefully have more of those out as audiobooks soon. And Aileron is also running a few contests, giving away gems from Smite and some other games. So if you're into those games, go look up his page. You can get details on that. Also in LitRPG news, Jeffrey Falconlogue announced that the audiobook versions of the Slime Dungeon Chronicles are actually going to be made, at least for books 1 through 3. He said that book 1 is already in production, so yay. It's a fun series. Also in audiobook stuff, Ascend, the audiobook for Ascend Online, one of my favorite series, is up for pre-order. So go check it out if you want to pre-order it. It's available. There are no samples currently. It does have a release date of July the 18th, though, so you'll be able to get it in 12 days, 12, 13 days from now. We'll have a link in the show notes for you if you want to go pre-order that. Okay, speaking of audiobooks, these are the ones, there have 2 that came out this week for LitRPG audiobooks. The first is The Trap Mind Project, Amarillia Book 1. It is narrated by Tristan Morris. It is available now. And the second one is The Crystal Sphere, Neuro series, Book 1. Narrated by Graham Halstead and produced by Tantor Audio. So both of those novels got good scores for me. I enjoy them both. Amarillia, I think, is up to 6 or 7 at this point. So I'm really happy to see that the author is doing an audiobook version of it, and I hope it as well. But both narratives sound great to me. I listen to the samples. But again, audiobooks are one of the things that are very person-specific sometimes. So go check out the samples and pick them up if you want to. We'll have a link in the show notes for you if you wish to do so. Okay, now, out now for review next week. These books came out this week. Couldn't get to them, unfortunately. This includes Hero of Naught, Life in the North, an apocalyptic LitRPG. Also, Dream 3, books I've been looking for the author for a while, so good to see a third book in that series come out. It's entitled Wind of Souls. And then DLC, a LitRPG adventure in the Crucible Shard series, Book 6. That's actually be out on July the 7th, which is when most people will be watching this. And also Times of Change, Amarillia, Book 7. See, there you go. Book 7 is going to be out on Friday, July the 7th as well. But I'll be looking at those novels on next week's show. Okay, in upcoming LitRPG, this is where we list off the stuff that's just coming out in July and August. So it's going to be me reading titles. Skip ahead if you don't want to listen. But this way you know what's coming out. Vengeance of Vanaheim, out July the 11th. Codename Freedom, Survive Week 1 is going to be out July the 12th. On the 14th of July, it's going to be the first planet, the Space Masters. On the 15th of July, it's going to be Kingdom Level 3. On the 17th of July, it'll be The Long Road to Karn, Realm of Arkham Book 5. On July the 28th, it's going to be Stratus Online, Awakening. On the 31st of July, A Slave in the Locked Lands. That's the Weirdest Noob Book 2. On August the 1st, Rapid Play. On August the 4th, The Glitch Fiends. This is part 2. It's the third book in the Hell's Glitch series, though. I know. Then on the 15th of August, it'll be Fayroll Book 4. Also on August the 15th, it'll be The Last Warrior of Unegaya. And then on the 22nd of August, it'll be Shards Over Reality. On the 30th of August, it'll be The Shaman's Revenge, Away of the Shaman, Book 6. So there you go, folks. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with Realm of the Nine Circles, The Grind, a LitRPG novel, written by P. Joseph Cherubino. Okay. This novel is 313 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, book 1 is it's a fine book. It got a score of about 6 out of 10 for me. It was enjoyable, but what brought it down from being like good or great was basically the lack of information about the game world. There were inconsistencies how damage was described, number-wise. There were percentages for some weird reason, and no detail about how characters progressed. The story was engaging, but heavy on werewolf events as well. Now, in book 2, this is almost the complete opposite of book 1. There are tons of game mechanics, solid numbers everywhere. After every level up, you get to see the main character's character sheet and all those stats damage. Damage given or taken from combat is also described in these numbers. The author really took the time to put a bunch of game details in here. This book is crunchy as all heck with numbers and descriptions, folks. There's also crafting, some town building, which helps to break up the stream of combat. Now, in the larger story context, this one starts right after the end of book 1. I mean, like moments, basically. The main character jumps back into the game, and he's told that, essentially by Virgil AI, that there's danger to the world if the game gets taken over by the bad guy. It's going to affect the world, and they all might go to jail because they'll be exposed as an artificial AI, and the government doesn't like that apparently. Also, a bunch of corruption stuff. And so the main character is supposed to get to level 20, jump into a different part of the world, a different realm, and help beat the bad guy. And this story is essentially that level grind from him having to start a new character, starting at level 1 and going all the way to level 20 plus, and then getting to that new realm, which is when the book ends. And so that is the story, and the title of the novel, The Grind, is very apropos. There you go. It's kind of a grind sometimes, and that's really what the show about. It's about the grind that the main character has to go through to get the levels that he needs within, I think it's 7 days. And of course, so he starts off real quick, creates a new character, and he starts out killing wildlife. He dies a few times, as you should at the beginning of a level when you're not sure how your character's working. And then he moves on to a simple village quest. This is a new village to him, apparently. Apparently the game, this is sort of spoiler, is reacting to his presence in the world. And it creates a village for him that with really simple, dumb characters in AI, with names like the merchant, the blacksmith, the tailor, things like that. And he finishes the quest, but when he comes back, he notices that those characters have become more complicated. They have more backstory. They have more personality. And this is part of the evolution of this game, in that the AIs, which are, remember from book 1, are actually brains taken out of people. That was part of the big evil thing from book 1, is that they were killing people, taking out their brains and using them as like organic processors for this game world, are actually merging with the game more, and they're responding to what the main character is doing because they recognize him as a power of change in the world because he beat the bad guy in book 1. And it's kind of interesting to see that development there. There's some very genuinely funny new NPCs. One of my favorites is probably the Russian potion master, who's a ghost. Really fun character. I enjoyed it. It's kind of cool. But again, crafting is introduced in the novel. The main character takes the time to do some crafting and learn about it. And there's also some town building aspects, which I'm already a big fan of. It's not a ton, but there is some in that he takes control of a couple villages. Cool stuff there as well. But the focus of this story is on combat. The combat has a nice variety of combat situations, variety of monsters, cool strategies to defeat them. It's not always just, stab and slash the entire way through. The main character actually has to think about the things that he's doing for each particular type of mob and the situation. He actually uses crafting and the skills that he's learning outside of combat in very cool, fun ways, also including some NPCs that he hooks up with, helps help him clear the mob. So we're getting really very much combat-focused action stuff in this novel. And that's good and bad. If you love combat, great. This is the novel for you. But sometimes it feels like it's just the main character running from one fight to another fight And in between, there are these brief breaks where the main character returns to the village, sells some stuff, turns in some quests, does a little crafting. And it feels a little grindy sometimes. Sometimes you're like, more combat? And I personally, I love combat. I never thought I'd say that, but there were moments in here where we're just like, oh, it's another fight. We just had some cool crafting. It's like, can't we go back to that? So it is what it is. But again, very, very combat centric. And again, it's in the title, The Grind. So there you go. While book 2 really gained a ton in terms of solid game mechanics, what it sort of lost is a sense of tension. In book 1, remember the main character had to complete his mission in-game to save his friends who were being attacked in the real world. If he took too long, they were going to die. In book 2, there's really nothing except like this occasional reminder of a clock running down to indicate that the main character actually has to hurry. And so there is a bit of a loss of tension, which is fine. Again, this is more action-oriented. If you're looking for a good combat-focused story, this is your story, man. However, overall, it's a really good read with huge improvements in the descriptions and details of how the game works. From me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. I enjoyed it. Okay, on to SpeedRunner by Adam Elliott, which is the Tower of Babel Book 1. Okay. This one is 360 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I received an advance copy of the novel. I purchased it when it became available. Oh, and the author was nice enough to give the podcast a shout out at the end of the story. It doesn't affect the review at all, but I thought it was nice, and I thought it was something, if you care about it, you should know about. But it doesn't affect the review at all. But I thought it was cool. Okay, here's the setup for the novel. A tower suddenly appears in Manhattan, making thousands of people disappear and leaving others behind. Within the tower are levels and levels of monsters, strange treasures, mysterious forces that let people become more powerful, just like in an RPG game. Now fast forward 2 years, and our main character, Caden, is just old enough to enter the tower and become an adventurer there. His goal is to conquer the 50 explored levels of the tower in record time. He plans to make a speedrun. So there we go. That is the story premise. Okay, there were a lot of things I really enjoyed about the story. The game mechanics of the story are superbly detailed and well thought out. The author put a tremendous amount of effort into making the game mechanics interesting, and I really did love that about the story. There are tons of classes, abilities, skill options, and it's staggering when you think about the amount of options available to the characters, because there were basically 4 base character classes, but depending on how you distribute your stats and everything, or in this case, what kind of bloodlines you take, a lot of these also branch out into different subclasses. And there's multi-classing in the story, so you can take multiple classes as you level. You can take one level in Juggernaut and another level in Mage if you want to, if you qualify, if you your stats basically say you can do so. But it allows for a lot more customization and different playstyle options within this game world. And of course, there's also some crafting in the story, which I'm always a huge fan of. And the crafting system is as detailed as the combat and the magic systems, which again, one of the things I always like about these kind of stories is that I can see myself playing them as video games or as MMOs, or hopefully in the future as actual VR games. And this one definitely gives me tons of information where I could plan out a character, and I do so. I mean, I kind of did it in my head. I'm kind of enthralled by the idea of the Juggernaut. I'm like, ooh, that sounds like it might be fun. And again, there's a lot of details that I'm kind of limiting as far as like the options for these game mechanics in the story, but I don't want to spoil them for you as the reader, because I know part of my enjoyment is just kind of the discovery of these small details to these game mechanics. And there's tons. So there you go. Now, story-wise, the first half of the novel is pretty good. The main character's plan to speed run to the tower are derailed when he tries to help out a group of other players that get in over their heads, and the permadeath of one of them sets off a series of events that changes the way that the main character has to adventure. It's a really good setup, especially with the introduction of permadeath. Which is, I mean, it's not like you die once and then you die forever. It's very much along the lines like, if you die and nobody heals you because they forgot supplies or something, then you essentially have like a small window of time to heal that person. And if they don't get healed, then they die forever. Then there's, so that's, I think that raises the stakes in this particular novel and game, without making it too difficult. Like, the main character can die, he just has to be healed with the bandage or something. So I like the mechanic, and it's a really good setup because it allows for, revenge, redemption, guilt, a bunch of emotional feelings. And so cool setup. However, while the middle of the story is basically a bunch of training, dealing with the consequences of that particular event, the end was slightly disappointing, because for most of the novel, it's really about the main character, killing the monsters, going on adventures, doing quests, and earning every single level he gets and every single ability and score. And at one point, he kind of gets access to this unique special ability, and it becomes a little overpowered, a little OP. At the end, it was just kind of slightly disappointing to see that all those big problems that were established are kind of solved at the very end with almost a magic wand, in that the main character suddenly has a bunch of abilities and spells that we as the reader had never seen before. Like, he went through training at the end to get them. It's not like he didn't earn them in some way, but as the readers, we didn't get to experience all those small details of him establishing or discovering those spells and abilities. And so when he finally uses them at the end to solve the problems and save people, it feels less than satisfying to me as a reader, because it feels like, oh, magic wand, ta-da, the day saved. So it felt like a slightly weaker ending than I would have liked to have seen. But other than that, I really, really did enjoy the novel, and it was almost got a score of an 8 out of 10. But with that particular ending, I was like, okay, that just dropped the enjoyment a little bit for me, just enough so that it basically gets a 7 out of 10, but still a very good read. And again, you can't go wrong with this novel. It has action, it has adventure, it has dungeon crawling, crafting, and of course, the main character makes some cool friends along the way. So again, gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. I enjoyed it. Okay, on to our next novel. It's going to be Winds of Fate, Fayroll, Book 3, written by A. Vasilyev. I hope I'm saying that right at some point. Okay, this one is 344 pages. It is $6.95. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, now full disclosure, I did receive an advance copy of the novel. Purchased it when it came out, of course. Also, this is kind of expensive. I generally try to look for, when I'm purchasing stories, about a penny a page. So if it's a 200-page novel, I expect to pay, about $2. And in this case, this is about double that. And it is not available in Kindle Unlimited. So because it's kind of expensive, if you didn't love book 1 and 2 in the series, you may not like. You may not feel like paying that much for a series that you don't love or you don't really enjoy. For me, absolutely worth it. I had a good time reading it, but it may not be worth it for you. So just a heads up on that. Okay, the story in book 3 starts immediately after the events of book 2. Remember, the big storyline about this series is the main character in game got access to like a really rare quest line, and he has to help some dryads in like the north, south, east, and west accomplish something and get like their powers back. And if he does, he'll actually bring back the old gods into the world. And so that's like the big overarching storyline for all these novels, or at least these first set. And in books 1 and 2, he saved a dryad, did the thing. In book 3, his big quest is to do the same thing with like the dryad in the north, and that does eventually happen. But most of this is him just adventuring, having fun, going some really cool, interesting quests in the story, and that's kind of what it is. So that's all you should really expect. Now, the first 4% of this novel is kind of cleanup for a real life storyline in the novel. I believe it was in book 2. The main character dumped his materialistic girlfriend he had in book 1, and it's kind of coming back to haunt him at this point. Her brother shows up, beats him up, steals his money, and robs him. And because the main character now works for the game company that he's also gaming in, Fayroll security shows up, eventually catches the guy, brings him in front of the main character for judgment, and it kind of shows how serious the main character how serious his new bosses at Fayroll are, because he makes a joke casually saying, "Oh, you should go take him out back and kill him," and the security guys almost do, and the main character Harrington obviously realized that they were going to do it, and he stops them, and he makes up some excuse to save their life. But it's at this point in the story that he kind of realizes exactly how powerful and willing to maybe kill that Fayroll security and the Fayroll game creators are about their system and their employees. And so it kind of puts a lot of pressure on him as an employee of theirs to do what they say, or does he want to get out of the game? And so it's an interesting little blip in like the real world storyline, but the majority of the story still takes place in the game. By the 5% mark, you're back in the game and you spend the majority of your time there. There were little moments where the main character jumps out, of course, because he's not, he still has a job making the Fayroll magazine, and he still has a girlfriend he has to take care of. And there's a few there's actually a really cute story point where he's goes to a picnic sponsored by his bosses, and he saves his girlfriend from a lecture and stuff, and it was cute. But again, most of the story is in game, and this story almost feels like an extension of book 2, because at the end of book 2, the main character is making arrangements to go to the north, to go through the mountain passes, and that's exactly where the in-game storyline of this one starts off. There you go. And of course, there's from there on in, it's basically just a bunch of quests that are really cool. And I don't want to spoil it for you, because me saying anything about it is kind of going to be a thing. But the trek through the mountains is creepy. After that, when you ultimately makes it to the frozen north, the new in-game mechanic is probably going to be the reputation system that he has to kind of figure out and maximize, because he can't get to the really cool quest until he increases his reputation with all of the north, which is apparently a big challenge. And so that's the new thing in this story, in addition to, of course, the weird, amazing action-oriented quests that he goes to, the neat gear he gets, and of course the levels he gains in it. And of course, he gets a rare quest in the north to go save a princess, and it turns in like this big seafaring adventure, huge and epic battles, things. So, but go enjoy it. There's lots of good action, interesting quests, and a cool quest to save a princess, which is always nice, who was kidnapped. So entertaining overall. Gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. Okay. On to The Curse of Rion Castle, which is the second book in the Neuro book series, written by A. Levadny. Now, you might recognize that name. This is the same author that has made the Phantom Server series, and this is technically a prequel to that one. And at some point, there's timelines are supposed to cross, but again, you don't have to have read the Phantom Server series to enjoy this. If you have read it, you're gonna enjoy this one a little bit more, because they do make references to it in this novel. But again, not necessary, not a prerequisite to enjoy this novel. It is 296 pages. It is $5.99. It is not available in Kindle Unlimited either. Again, neither one of these translated Russian stories is going to be available in Kindle Unlimited. I also got a advanced review copy of this one. I bought it when it became available. And again, same as before, this one's a little expensive. It's again almost twice what I normally pay at $5.99 for 296 pages, about 2 cents per page. So it's a little more expensive. And again, if you like the first book, you're going to like this one. If you didn't like the first book, this is not going to be any different. So there you go. Now, book 2 again picks up right where book 1 left off. Just as Alexis, the main character, and his team take control of Rion Castle, they're tasked with purging it of its inhabitants. And if you don't remember, in book 1, Alexis, he has a bad situation, and the creators of this game convince him to implant himself with a chip and to be a beta tester for the system rather than, die or whatever. And so he is the only person, as far as he knows, Alexis, with this neural implant that allows him to experience the game as if he was there. He experiences all the highs and lows, all the environments are real to him for his full sensory experience, and he also feels pain after a certain threshold. And so for adventuring for him is actually dangerous. And part of his big goal was to according to the game testers, was to conquer this castle. He did it, and that's where this novel starts off at. Now, as soon as they finish conquering Rion Castle, the first 10% of the novel is dedicated to that new quest line for them, which is to purge the cursed inhabitants of this castle, and it only takes 10%. It's at that point, it's really just him and one other teammate who have to do that purging. And in that particular first 10%, it is revealed that he may not be the only person with this neuro chip in his brain, which allows him to feel pain and endangers his life on occasion. So that's a nice little twist to the story. But again, the main character's big, like the thing that's really new with this story is the fact that he has a castle and that he owns it. And so not only does he own it, but he has to repair it. He has to staff the castle, the surrounding village, quickly enough, because this is a special castle. It belonged to the founders. And so there are a lot of like really high end game artifacts within the castle that other guilds and other players in this game are going to want. And so if he wants to keep his castle, he's going to have to figure out a way to repair it and to defend it, which are both really expensive endeavors that usually require like guild resources, like really big guild resources to do so. And that's the case here as well. And so a lot of this story revolves around castle building, town building aspects, town management stuff, and castle management stuff, like hiring NPCs to manage repairs and look for treasure, and actually rebuilding the castle and finding money to do it. And at one point, there's still action and everything. There's still dungeon crawling. Like a good 30% of the novel is really just the main character and his new guild going to the dungeons underneath the castle, clearing them out of demons. So there's a ton of action there as well. But there's also a lot of cool management stuff. And if you're into town building and if you're into crafting, this is going to be appealing for you because a good portion of the story is devoted to that kind of stuff. So I enjoyed it. And near the end of the story, there's actually a brief expansion on the Crystal Fields connection to the Phantom Server project and what the government is willing to do to get the knowledge of the founders. If you've read that series, the Phantom Server series, you're going to be able to guess what this means for this story. And so again, that's just added flavor. If you haven't read that series again, you're still going to enjoy it. It's a nice little twist. And at the very end, though, I have to say that there's a twist that is either going to break this story or it's going to make it really cool. And I'm not really sure which one it's going to be. Because it seems like there's a huge time jump, which I'm not going to say anything more about. But I thought it was a very interesting choice. So there you go. But again, I had a good time reading it. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, on to Overpowered, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquest, Book 1. It is written by Shane Lochnan Black. So there you go. It is 170 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, I will read you the author's description of the story. Okay, Kings and Conquest, by the time most people have heard of the newest multiplayer fantasy game developed by Fairly Unusual Games, they've been overwhelmed with over $200 million in crowdfunding. The founders' accounts are going for 6-figure contributors. There is talk of an augmented reality mobile accessory app and a 3D printed treasure that can be sold for real money. The hype is beyond belief. Gaming fans go berserk. With contributors and media eagerly anticipating a release date announcement, Fairly Unusual stock suddenly and inexplicably plunges. CEO Garrett Weiland, once a darling of both the Silicon Valley and Wall Street, is indicted by a federal grand jury for insider trading the day before the company files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Less than 48 hours later, Wyland is shot and killed by officers of the Mississippi Highway Patrol attempting to execute a fugitive warrant. A briefcase full of cash, a fake ID, and an airline ticket are found in his car. Weeks pass, with accusations flying, lawsuits being filed, and a revelation after revelation rocking the online and offline media. A fourth-rate host of a little-known game streaming channel receives an emailed gift marked Kings and Conquests News from one of his subscribers. Thinking it's a prank, Jordan Hall opens it up and discovers a founder's account login with a full-functioning Kings and Conquest server, a 100-year prepaid subscription, and map coordinates marking a dangerously isolated in-game location labeled Safekeep. The email is from Garrett Wyland. So there you go. That's kind of the premise. And again, this is a relatively short novel. It's 170 pages, so decent size, well priced. Now, the first 33% of the story is seriously just a bunch of hype. And I'm not saying like it's a bunch of hype about the novel itself. It's a bunch of hype about this game, Kings and Conquest. And it's literally just a bunch of in-story hype about how amazing and complicated and game-changing this new game is going to be. And how the game company is intentionally making it the most frustrating game ever and unplayable as like this weird money-making scheme. And honestly, it was tedious to me. I almost put down the book, but I pushed through it for you guys, the readers. And it got better after that. The story is calling itself a thriller, and it does live into that to the hallmark. As far as I'm aware, I'm not a huge thriller fan, so I can't tell you if it's a particularly good thriller or a bad thriller. But after that 33% mark, once you actually got into the game, and the other parts of that synopsis were into play, where the main character gets the mysterious package from the supposedly dead founder, then it becomes very much more thrillerish. The group of friends, the No Name Guild, gets a pack of exclusive Founders Guild life subscription packages sent to them from the now dead CEO of the game company. They're told that if they can get their characters to level 75 and find a special place called the Stronghold, they'll be able to get the majority shares of the game company, who's now worth billions of dollars. And at that 33% mark, that's finally when we actually get into this game, which by this point we've heard 33% of this novel about. And there are a series of small scenes where the team figures out the right way to play the game after being seriously frustrated with it. Like, they logged in the game and they're just murdered repeatedly over and over and over again. And it turned out to be like this weird game mechanic, which I'm not going to spoil for you. But I understand exactly how frustrating it can be for these characters, because I've played badly designed games where it is frustrating. But these brief gameplay experiences are broken up by a variety of scenes that bounce between self-congratulatory border people, investigative journalists, video game commentators, and bad people planning on getting the big prize for themselves. Now, at the 65% mark of the story, that's when a lot of this thriller stuff comes in. The no-name guilds find out that people are hunting them in real life, and they have to flee. They don't enter the game again until the very end of the story, and even then it's for a few paragraphs, and instead they're on the run from the bad people for most of this end part of the novel. Although there is like one or two uses of an augmented reality app that I assume is foreshadowing what's going to happen in book 2. I'm assuming it's going to be a much bigger part of book 2 storyline, but it appears here for like a tiny bit. The writing, while full attention and it's entertaining, at some point while I'm reading this story, I had to ask myself, is this actually LitRPG? Because I realized that while there was a lot of talk about the game, there was very little actual game in this story. Like, there's plenty of thriller. There's plenty of like thrills, people chasing and trying to kill them for the prize or whatever. But at some point I realized, wait, they haven't actually been in game a ton in this story. And what really helped me decide was when I actually had to go back and actually count the percentages of how often they actually went into the game and how much of the story existed within the actual game of Kings and Conquest. And when I went back and looked, only about 13% of the story. There's tons of people talking about the game, about how frustrating it is, and some of the game mechanics, but they're talking about it in situations where it's like a game commentators or the boredom designers, or there's people online, complaining to each other about how frustrating and how they're going to sue the company, and things like that. I went back and actually counted the in-game story places and found them to be between the 33% and 35% mark. for another percentage at 44%, another 2 percentages at 46%, 47%, another 3 percentages, 44, not even a percent, 54 at not even percentages. I'll leave them on there in the actual full notes. You want to check them, the actual places where they show gaming, the actual game. And even then, it's people looking at a computer screen and commenting on what was happening. It's not actually them in virtual reality or actually being in the game. It's just them looking at computers, which is not bad. And that doesn't mean it's not LitRPG on its own, but just the content-wise of like, less than 15% of the story is actually in game. Like, does that really qualify as LitRPG? And there is a description of game mechanics there. They're contradictory to what was told before, but they do exist. And so overall, I had to decide, no, it's not really LitRPG. It doesn't meet the first criteria. It's not set in a game world or a world with RPG-like mechanics. And even in the places where the game was actually mentioned, there's contradictory information about how the game works, which makes sense in the context of like the game designers intentionally making this frustrating. But it really does make it hard to gauge character progression in this particular story. So as a video game thriller, really decent. As far as I can tell, I don't read a lot of thrillers, but I had a good time reading it. I would give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. As LitRPG though, it didn't really fit the bill. It didn't satisfy, unfortunately. And so it gets a score of 4 out of 10. So there you go, folks. Okay, on to the next story. The Last Days of Mithril, a LitRPG adventure. Written by Eric S. Brown. Okay, this is 107 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description of the story. The colonists aboard the Branch are en route to a new world. During their long journey, they enter the immersive VR world of Mithril. Mithril is a place of magic and monsters where anything is possible. However, something has gone horribly wrong. Only the latent telemechanic Alex can save everyone aboard the ship, assuming, of course, that the monsters don't get him first. There you go. That's actually a pretty good description of what the novel is. First of all, talk about the price. Again, 107 pages for $2.99. That's about 3 cents per page, and it's a lot more than I would normally pay for a story, but it is on Kindle Unlimited, so that to me makes it, for me anyways, there's no harm in trying it. But for those of you who don't have Kindle Unlimited, I don't know. That's up to you. I didn't give it a particularly good score, but you guys can decide. The premise of the story, again, the author does a really good job of summarizing. In the far future, humanity is colonizing far-off planets. The Branch is one of the colony ships. Human colonists and crew are kept in cryosleep to keep their minds occupied during the long trip. They're also logged into a game called Mithril, which is a fantasy Western world. Unfortunately, the game's controlling AI has become self-aware and wants to keep everyone in the game forever and take over the colony ship. There are only 2 people who are actually aware that they're in the game and not just their characters. Glenn, a human pilot with psionic ability to shape tech, and Alex, the ship's pilot. Glenn initiates a group of game characters to escort Alex to him across the dangerous wastelands full of monsters and murderous fantasy creatures. If Alex can reach Glenn, they may be able to stop RAS, the game's AI. So that's my description of the story. This is a novella with it fully ends. There's an actual completion. It ends the story. It's a rare standalone novel, and that's all it's intended to be. And it is technically LitRPG. It's set in a game world, and there are game mechanics that are shown to the main character, Alex. There is power progression. The main character levels up a whole 2 times in the story. However, the story feels more like a sci-fi Western that's based on Westworld, with the theme of that rebelling artificial intelligence. And I really feel that that's what this was. Like, the author was watching Westworld, and they're like, hey, that would make a really good story for LitRPG or like a sci-fi story. And that's what they wrote. And that's what this really does feel like. It feels like Westworld with orcs and elves. There's still six shooters and everything. So very Western feel, just with fantasy creatures also involved in the story. And again, not a bad premise. The story itself, not bad. Tons of action in the story. But personally, I got bored waiting for RPG elements to show up at some point. I'm like, I kept reading this story. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Cool stuff. Could set up action. More story setup, action. I'm like, where's the RPG for this LitRPG story going to show up at some point? And it never does. There are the extent of the RPG mechanics are purely informational. The main character creates a new character, Alex, and this he has a character sheet which includes the stats. He focuses on agility based, and so like I said, this is technically LitRPG because there is game information there, but that's kind of the extent of those game mechanics. Is its information. The main character Alex has some secret ability to access his information like that, but also focusing on other people and landscape. He also gets additional game information, almost like the identify skill, except that it's just a psionic ability he magically has. And so he gets information like monster names or details about poisons or creatures' weaknesses. And he's the only one who's aware that this is still a game. Everyone else in this world thinks they're their characters. And he does level twice, which is apparently his class's max, which is weird to me. But other than that, there really aren't any other RPG mechanics. There's like nothing like damage notifications. There are no weapon descriptors. There are, he doesn't get a bunch of equipment later on, or he doesn't get increased abilities or class abilities or anything like that with like special skills or anything. So it really didn't feel like LitRPG, but again, it technically qualified because it met the minimum qualifications. And it just really felt more like Westworld mixed with fantasy creatures, which is again not bad, but it was disappointing because I was expecting game mechanics. I was expecting, that stuff, and it really just feel like the game world is really just a backdrop for the story of this artificial intelligence trying to break out, and two humans are the only saviors who can possibly save the ship, and that's the story, and that's what's important, and that's what's focused on, including a bunch of combat scenes. But the game world itself really is just a day player. It's just somebody who happens to exist there, and there are game mechanics, but it was disappointing, especially by the end. The story devolves into like this Neo Matrix kind of stuff, where the main character has this ability to just create things and by his imagination within the game world because he has a psionic ability, and that's how they beat the AI in the very end. And it was just a little disappointing because again, none of the game mechanics mattered in the end. The levels don't seem to mean anything. None of the stats actually mean anything, but they are there. And the game does take place, and the story takes place with an actual game world that these two characters are aware of, and the author and the readers knows that it's a game, so it qualifies technically. But it was disappointing as a LitRPG story. So I get a score of 5 out of 10. Just kind of meh for me. You may like it more though. Okay. On to Fragged 2, which I believe is the last story in this week's review. It's written by Zachariah Dracolius. Okay, the author's description. More swearing, more violence, more Zoe's fighters. Zoe's adjusting quickly to having players back in the game alongside her, but that doesn't mean the world of Threat is any easier a place to live, especially with midnight looming ahead. In this, the second chapter of the Fragged series, Zoe starts to trust her friends again, and with everything from simple resource collecting to planning a high-stakes mid-morning scheme. Okay, this is 60 pages. It is 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. 99 cents is I think the lowest that an author can put their book without putting it for free. So price-wise, not horrible. I pay the full purchase price. I don't actually read this one in Kindle Unlimited because I want to support the author. I like the book in the series. This is, again, the second episode in the Fragged serial series. Zoe, the main character, is joined by her two player friends, Chad and Paul, and together they work to improve the community the main character founded. Remember, she grabbed some natives and made them part of her community. And the players actually want to expand their buildings underground, but they need more resources to do that. So in addition to surviving the local monsters, they'll have to rob a few neighbors to get the things that they need. This is not long. The story is not long enough to spoil anything. Like anything I would say to you would be spoilery, but there's tons of action. There's good crafting. There's good survival stuff. And it's a fun story. It's short. It's enjoyable to read. There is a ton of cursing. So if that offends you, okay. But it's a short, cool mix of survival, crafting, and killing. And that's all it says it's going to be, and that's all it is. So I had a good time reading it. Gets a score from me of 7 out of 10. There we go. And that's it. We're done. Finished. The end. Thank you, everyone, for listening, watching. Remember, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and, of course, Patreon. And if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can always find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But again, thanks for hanging out with me today. Until we can hang out again, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody. Okay, we're going to get ready to go in 3, 2, 1.